So there's all of that stuff that exists kind of today if you were to build new. Um, and I just found out today about some of the lifting issues that if the base home unit can be lifted, but any accoutrements that are added on create problems for the lifting exercise. So, and I assume that there's additional cost and all of that associated with, but if the homeowner isn't aware of that beforehand, that may be something to get clarification around. So that was a learning here recently for me.
And if I could just one last point, one of the things, and I know someone said this in a presentation to council about all this, that we are small, so we can be a good incubator for all these ideas.
Right.
And so again, it may not be that you have the solutions, but you have some ideas, and then it's working with the state or the feds to say, hey, we have an idea. Let us do this in some way, and we can pioneer it to see or pilot it to see if it's going to work or not. So
I like that. I've
who
also
said that? He said that.
Oh, well, there you go.
So, but we have to get something out. So I think if we can get some more information that you can share with the group as far as what you've learned on that,
Yes.
if we were to do this, then I think we can ask the other question about to the city is that, okay, say we were to do that, what kind of brownie points do we get from the CRS standpoint if we enhance the codes? Is that 10 points or is it 100 points? Right. So what would be good to know is let's go after the things that give us 500 points, right, not 10 points. So if we could at least get some meat on the bone, then sure, we can float that kind of stuff around, I think. Okay. Linda, do you have an update for us?
Yeah, I had a meeting scheduled with the Warner Boys gentleman, and he had to cancel. So I do have a meeting scheduled for Wednesday with him. So he had to cancel the last meeting, so we'll be rescheduled for this Wednesday.
Good deal.
So I'll get with him then and tell him. I really want to ask him to come if that's good with you guys, and at least listen in to see what we're doing, and hopefully he'll do that. But I mean, that's kind of what I was thinking, so that he can get on board as well with us. Is that something that you guys would be interested in?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, that was kind of my goal in wanting to get with him. So to have him come out and get involved. So I have a meeting Wednesday, and I will let Ashley know, and she can scooch out everything that he says to me, and I'll pass it on to her, and she can pass it on to you guys.
Good deal. Chris Leeds had said that he's trying to coordinate with Mark Bellis at Pasco County, and they're going to propose some dates for potentially getting with us and to share their resiliency plan, what they're doing so far. So he hasn't locked in on that, but hopefully we'll have that maybe before the holidays. But so we'll see on that. And then he's also working with Mike Durant, trying to get with the Energy and Educational Center to try to get those folks engaged. Again, trying to get as many people on the same page, working together. If we get the state park, we get the EMC, right, in Audubon, that's this size has more might. So let's go with that. Daryl, I don't have anything in particular, but since you're here tonight, are there any things that, as we started our first meeting, things that are on your mind that you'd like to address, if you could share with us, just to put you on the spot, of course, but things that come to mind, things that you'd like to see come out of this that would be helpful from your standpoint?
So right now, I'm working with Matt. We're working internally on a bunch of stormwater issues right now. Checking some of the roads out, and how we spoke before, and a lot of these open swales, I do want to see get closed up, Reason being is create a lot of mosquitoes, create a lot of bugs, just aesthetic reasons, and it's just more maintenance. So um, that's kind of where I'm at with some of the stuff for internally what we're doing as for our short. We just got all that stuff, all that extra money in there, Matt, that we're gonna continue to work on doing studies to get what we need to and get what we can done with it for us. So.
On the stormwater piece from the county that ships stuff downstream to us, do we have any idea?
Which part are you talking about?
I'm sorry?
Which you said from the county?
Right. Any stormwater upstream of us that's coming down. Do you know how much retention capacity the county and or city have to provide buffering? Or is there a way we can find out?
So we actually receive all of US 19 as well from DOT. That all comes to us as well. So that piece on US 19 more down south flows into that body of water on Old Post Road.
And they have no retention capabilities.
It all comes to us.
Can we potentially look at influencing them to establish some capability to help us?
We can. They just cleared out all that their right of way down there that goes to Miles off of 19.
Mm-hmm.
There used to be a
Further up.
right there, right there. Yeah, it flows down and goes across and goes into that, and then that goes out into the canal through Blue Point and comes out.
But they have
So we take all of US 19's water.
Right there's the retention.
that's their retention or our retention?
Our retention.
It's ours. That's where it goes.
Where I'm going is,
Yeah.
can we potentially put the monkey on them
Yep.
to establish retention? Let them do their exercise as far as if there's space they need to acquire or something on that, or like they've done with all the new roads out here. If you go off of 52, they've built sizable retention areas. So put the monkey on their back. To do
So
If I can step on his toes here for a second.
Yep.
So, so the potential for retention off of 19 here is a point between here and here, right? So we know this retention is serving the stormwater right now, and under most circumstances, it's not an issue. Where it's an issue is when you have a stormwater event and a high tide. That's when we have an impact on our residents. Then too much water coming in, no way for the water to get out.
it just rises.
And so the only way, there's two things that would need to be done. One, we have to increase this retention area.
Correct.
Right? And we have to clean this area. You know, one of the thoughts is that there are some new ways to handle the way the water is stored in through here. Potentially widening that channel out. I mean, you lose property that could be. Your phone. It's here.
I got it. I muted it.
You lose some developability of this land by doing that, because this land here is, one private. And
There used to be like a golf cart or a go-kart place there or something.
it probably
Way
could
back
be
when.
developed.
Yeah.
So you lose that ability, but you create a larger channel that would go into a larger, whether it's a retention or detention. A benefit to that then is in non-stormwater events, when you have a very high tide, and if we accept that the tide is going to keep going up higher every year, you would have a place for that water to come in and backfill, so it's not flowing back into these areas here.
And one of the studies I had done is with that section right there. Is with that whole coming off US 19 with that canal.
And so I think, from our standpoint, one of the things we can do is we can look at this drainage area that's either on our property or along the roadway,
Right.
and look to improve that ditch on our own to a certain degree. But there's property that could be acquired that would allow this to be expanded and create a larger area for retention.
Well, let me ask you this. We have this vacant property here, okay? If the state were to acquire that, do we get any tax revenue from the state? Nothing. So basically, we're toast. Okay.
Our problem is that we can't dig down to get a retention area.
Because of the water table.
You're just going to get it's going to be always full of water.
Right.
So you're just going to be defeating. That's why if you look at everything, it floats out.
Right.
So all of our inverts are at low tide. They need to be raised higher so they're not filling up on high tide. So everything still has time to flow out.
Well, let me tell you what I'm thinking is that close off all the culverts that go out. Okay? Everyone. All right? And then have pumps that pump out a la Netherlands. Okay? Since we're a unique situation here, we're low. Okay? We've got the state that isn't caring for their stuff. They're dumping the monkey on us. Okay? So I'm saying, hey, all right, let's figure out some other things that we can do on this, and let's look at shutting everything down and then putting pumps in place with backup capabilities, yada, yada, yada. So we can stem that problem that we have that's 100 years old, because that's how we handled stormwater, but just do something completely different. So then these can become holding areas because they're not connected to the Gulf. We control the water goes out. So we find areas like here, or maybe associated with the state park. We try to find some things there that we have more property for recharge and controlling our destiny, if you will, from a 2070 intermediate high doodah.
So when you talk about pumping it out, where's your idea or thought?
Well,
we're going to pump
it ultimately goes out,
To the canal.
but it goes out after it's clean. All right, because our holding areas are built to contemporary standards for better water treatment. So we improve the water quality, and then we pump it out when the timing is right, because we have capacity. That's why I was asking about capacity upstream of us. I don't want people continuing to dump on us when we're just trying to control our destiny here.
So we don't get anything from the east side. Everything comes from the west side. So everything on the east side goes to
Well,
right over there.
so you have to picture. So here's kind of some of the drainage here.
19's like the divider.
So there's like a bunch of drainage here that comes off onto Congress.
Yeah.
Part of it follows this path here.
Yep. Where they're working out on Spring here.
And now,
And it goes to Warner Voice.
yeah. So that's something that they're actually, the county's working on right now to increase the bottleneck that's
It
here.
comes from Magnolia.
Magnolia, right.
Yeah.
Right. So again, they're flushing stuff down to us. We'll have to contend with from a rain event or a high water event, because that's a gravity situation, right? So anytime the Gulf decides to be higher, this is all going to be non-functional to some level. So again, what I'm trying to do is hold your own at critical times. Now's the situation where I need you to hold your own. We need buffer capacity. So you cease and desist. You get your capacity on your property, okay, in your governance area, and then give us some breathing room here for the storm event, because we're preparing for the storm. So 48 hours in advance, for example, we're working with the MC. We do these things. We close the floodgates. You've got to be able to have the capacity to stand that down. So that's kind of where I'm wondering, instead of taking a more traditional approach, kind of thinking about, okay, hey, I can't build up the city. Okay, I don't know how to do that. Let's put it that way. So if I could stem the water, maybe that helps me, and I put the monkey on somebody else rather than us taking the monkey.
So you're just addressing stormwater event, non-flood, non-inundation.
If I have buffer capacity in here, because I've stemmed it outside of mine, whatever buffer capacity I have for that flood, I've got more than what I had before because I've told them to cease and desist. I don't know what.
So essentially, you're wanting that to be dry.
Maybe.
Yeah. Well, just so we're clear. So the two hurricanes affected us in two different ways.
Yes.
So Helene, our issue came from here.
Yes.
It came in flood inundation. We didn't have the flooding back
Because
here.
we didn't have the rain.
Milton, our flooding was coming from back here.
Right.
And so the difference is, again, this trailer park here, when Lake hit, had very little water.
Right.
When Milton hit, had a lot of water because of this, the fact
Right.
that they didn't have
And it backed up from.
yeah.
Right.
And the other thing, which I wanted to get to as well, is that there is a connection between kind of this drainage and this drainage. And so we had an issue in Candlelight because pond was flooding and couldn't get out. Why couldn't the water get out is because
Right down there, Matt. Right here.
yeah, over here. It comes down here and then it goes out to the river. And they had, so Newport Richie had blockages along their channel, which isn't their channel. It could be their channel. It depends on who you ask.
Yeah.
And right here, this was where the county goes underneath Washington to go into the Newport Richie channel. There was blockage there as well. And what we found out is as soon as they cleared all this blockage, it started going down. It took a few days for it to go down, but we lost all this water here. It clears up the issue. And so one of the things we need to do, and put down is once all the emergencies out of the way, is to sit down with both Newport Richie and the county to figure out this whole drainage. Because I think, part of it is our properties are draining into it. And, they're wetlands. They can hold a lot of water, but they all flow through the same bottleneck. Plus, we're getting a large area of development that probably is coming somehow into this area as well. Sure. And so that's where we started having issues with getting the county and their drainage in line with what's happening. So I agree with what you're saying. It just
Can I jump in here regarding that? And it kind of supports what you're saying, Carl. The last flooding event we had, Candlelight, I had 18 inches of water at my driveway and road, 21 at the end of the cul-de-sac. My neighbor across the street, he just told me during these events, because we were so full with water, he followed, and the county was pumping into someplace over there. I can get the details from him, but that was what filled us up. So it kind of supports what you're saying, Carl, and it's both of you together. It's what you're saying together. It's they were pumping to get rid of their stuff. They put it someplace, and then probably couldn't get out because it was, and I had almost 2 foot of water at my driveway and street. So it kind of supports
It's
both
all
what you're saying.
Badly overgrown right there, and it's very slow to drain.
The natural behavior is going to be to get rid of the water where I am.
Correct.
Okay, we already know that on Rowan, Embassy, whatever, they put the pumping station that they can push stuff across over Rowan in order to have it go, I think, gravity feed after that. I'm not aware of any other pumps. But if, again, I'm trying to see if we can figure out, put a thumb in the dike, all right, through the upland areas, and more importantly, put the monkey on their back to do some things. And I don't know how we have a more regional stormwater stuff. I know they're going through their stormwater planning now. What the outcome of that, we have no idea. But I'm just thinking if we could just kind of throw a little wrinkle into this and get the state and the county to be looking at us differently than we are being, well, you're downstream, is what I'm trying to figure out if we could do something like that. And the only way I could figure out how to do that, because I believe most of the development in the county is underbuilt from a capacity standpoint. They can stay 24 hours and all that. I don't drink the Kool-Aid, because once it tops out, then it goes downstream.
Right.
That's the way it works. So we're downstream, be it the river or somewhere else. So if we could, that's one task. The second task may or may not be more complicated, but it really depends on our elevations and stuff. So if we did something like Venice or Houston, is there a way we can do this to deal with that 5 feet of water? Is that economically feasible or not? And if we do something here, is that good enough? Do we have buffer to the north and to the south where that accomplishes something? Or no, we got too many things here that a weir here, or not a weir, a gate here or there is not going to give us that protection.
So one of the studies was down on the south side was we have to do it with the engineers was
Limestone.
yes, limestone and marina palms, because that all goes back kind of what in a sense you were saying, but just a makeshift one for now. So this comes like this.
Yep.
Goes through, goes down, goes all the way here, crosses Olsner, goes down, comes down here, and then goes right here at the end of Ben's.
Okay.
That's how far this travels when it gets high tide. That's how far it travels.
Wow. It's always wet there too.
So, what I was talking to the engineers with is right here. Put a plug in the storm pipe and see what it does. See what it does. If this all drains out and everything, well, then you know,
Right.
or then you have that. That's one of the things me and Matt had talked about. But because the some people think, not everybody, but as the tide comes in, everybody thinks the water's going to keep rising, and then flood. Well, it doesn't do that. It's just like gravity. It's only going to level. It's going to level out as far as it goes.
Sure.
You know. So if you end up plugging this and it works, and these people don't flood, then you know you have something here to be able to alleviate all this, and then you can use this stuff as drainage off limestone and everything else.
Well, the other thing with these,
You put a flap in, and then when the water builds up and the tide goes down, just opens up and pushes out.
or can we do something with the property here to develop? So,
That is going to be a development, I think, here.
okay, so again, with development, what type of standards should we have in place for a higher level for development? So to ameliorate potential water or inherently build capacity in that is above and beyond. If you're on this side of this 19 for development, we need to have twice your engineered typical design capacity.
And some of it also has to do with the mangroves. So, for example, here, where the marina is on Fisher and Limestone, this water can't drain out because the mangroves have created a mat.
Right. We do.
Have created a mat. So you could help with this storm and let it drain out this way when the tide gets low, but it doesn't. It takes a while to drain because of the mat that the mangroves are making.
Well, and that's the interesting part about the green protection is that it goes again to our codes on mangroves and stuff, because generally people think they're a hedge. But some of the stuff that I've seen, as little as 15 to 20 feet of mangrove can actually stem your water flow for some period of time. All right. So getting the experts in place to say, well, what is that? Maybe what we do is start planting mangroves in these areas. If we extended this here by a certain amount, and then so all of these things
Right.
kind of contribute. I want to do them all, but it's like, okay, we just need the information so we could make some reasonable recommendations to the city, and I don't feel like we have.
So when it comes to mangroves, DEP, they have it. Residents and homeowners can trim their own mangroves with no permit because it's on their
To
property.
4 feet, right?
Even if it's 8 feet, they can trim it down to 4. But if it's on government property, whatever it may be, you have to have a permit or somebody specialized in mangrove trimming to come trim it that has an arborist license in it. But as a homeowner, if you wanted to go cut them in your backyard, you don't need that.
Is that what our code says? Is
This
that-
supersedes the code for our city.
No, I understand that, but I thought we've given violations for people cutting their own mangroves in the past.
If we have it in our code, it would supersede what.
Well, that I understand that, but that then we need to certainly address that immediately.
What we can do is, if we believe something having to do with mangroves, we need to get it out there on what we want to do. If we believe that there should be no trimming, that's a recommendation to go forward with.
Correct.
But we just need to have, where does that fit into our puzzle?
Right.
And that part I don't know yet. So I think mangroves could potentially be a big winner for us, but I just don't know how to play it right now. Okay. But I think that was probably a little bit more than I was hoping for, but it kind of feeds into the half adaptation planning piece because stormwater was a big component of that. And that I hope, let's not take a lot of time, but if we could take a little bit of time. Did anybody have an opportunity to go through the half stuff at all?
I went through it probably when it was originally sent to me, so that must have been a month and a half ago. That was pre-storm.
So were there things that jumped out of that for you that you thought were really important?
I keep coming back to these bioswales just in general, where we need, obviously more water retention and swales of some kind or another. I don't necessarily know that I like the bioswale thing because it's a lot of maintenance. It's just a lot of maintenance. And they clog up and they get inundated after,
As
10,
long as it's
15
Florida
years.
friendly stuff, that is less
Right.
or whatever it may be. They usually generally less, but if you put stuff that's not, like some people like to plant pepper trees that they have and swim
Oh
things
my
like that.
God.
So, but if you keep it Florida friendly,
Right.
the bioswales do work at times as long as they're Florida friendly and salt resistant. So.
Mm-hmm. But I see a lot of, swales in the city where, they're just, we need to put them underground and cover them over. But that really is something that's, really stuck out to me because a lot of this other stuff, we can try to do it, but we need to raise the roads and there's bigger projects that need to be done. So it's hard to know which one to really nip at, you know what I mean, in short form. So.
Okay. Lynn, anything jump out? Nothing really. Okay. Daryl, have you looked at the half stuff in the past?
Not right.
Okay. Cool.
All right now.
All right. Well, I gone through it, and I think the part that kind of jumped out to me was how much of this for the 2070 intermediate high was like 50%, and then for the 100-year storm it was like 85%. So those types of things kind of got my attention. That means we got a whole bunch of our citizens that are having serious problems with water. The transportation routes, that was part of my questions on that. The things that I think are highly important from our community to the citizenry is I want to make sure my drinking water is good, my stormwater and my sewage goes away, and I can access things in and out on the roads. So as I've looked at this, that's the stuff that I came away with as being most important. So hence the conversation maybe more about stormwater than we wanted. I just thought that those are kinds of things that are important to, or are probably important to our community. Um, the stormwater, I think we had enough conversation about that. But I think the one thing that I wanted to try to orient around is looking at that. What do we target to? All right. So if I was to say the 2070 intermediate was something I'd like to be able to protect against, and let's do all our stormwater with that in mind. Let's look at our roads with that in mind. Let's look at everything with that, just so we have a reference point to see, okay, what does that mean? And then we can tag dollars onto it. And if it's a gazillion dollars, we know probably can't do that. But if we at least could agree on, let's look at it from this perspective, this starting point, I think that might be a good place to get to. There were like 15 flood scenarios that they talked about in there. And at one point in time, I thought the state was arguing for like an intermediate high. Matt, do you guys have any perspectives on what the expectations are for us in that arena, or no?
I don't think there's been anything from the state that's coalesced to this is what we want you to be planning for. I think actually that's part of what their strategy is by giving money to all the communities to get the vulnerability analysis and the adaptation plans done. So they get that, I wouldn't say for free, but they would get it more granular by area. And my expectation would be that that's the next thing from the state, is once they have all these done and they have all that data, they come back and say, okay, now this is what we think the state's policy needs to be. Cities, you have to plan to this.
Okay. Well, how about, would anybody be opposed to use the intermediate high as an initial target point for us to look at?
And I would say, if I remember right from the resiliency conference there back in May, or whatever it was, I think that's what most communities are looking at, is that
Intermediate high.
Yeah.
That, my recollection was that, but that's been a few years, so I just wanted to make sure. So for our purposes, when we're looking at things from a water level standpoint, you can go into the study and see what that is, the intermediate high. But for our initial efforts on things that we do, let's use that as a starting point. If we feel like the 100-year event is something we come into think is more relevant because this is something from a stormwater, the 100-year 1% deal is kind of a stalwart. But for our purposes to get going, why don't we use the intermediate high target for 2070 as a starting point? And so any work that we do around stormwater or whatnot, roads, let's see what those, if we can get those elevations through. So you believe we have stuff for the stormwater catch basins?
If not, I can.
Not catch basins, I'm sorry, the manholes.
If not, we have a nice little Trimble GIS unit I can use to get you the elevations.
Because the major roads, even if we had a real coarse grid, that would be better than nothing. But it would, so Bay, Grand, Washington, and no, there was something else. There was Pine Hill. In the half study, Pine Hill, Grand, Washington, and Bay.
That's pretty high.
So Pine Hill actually flows to that open piece of land next to the um, retirement home for that fountain is.
Oh, okay. So does it flood?
It's high.
It's
So
high
it's
now
Pine Hill.
because of the rain, yeah, but
Hmm.
it's usually really low. Like the water's low. The water level's low. Like you can have more intake there if you need it.
During Milton, it was up almost the road.
Oh wow.
But now it's like receded down a lot.
Because they're saying, I think the study was looking at the transportation routes for the major transport or critical transportation routes. Not sure the exact wording, but the 100-year storm event, they're saying 95% of those roads would be inundated. So in my mind, we got 70% of those are inundated for the intermediate high. Now, where they are, if we get some elevation, we can kind of see, okay, which ones are more of a priority? Where do we look first?
Yeah.
And then we can incorporate stormwater and other things
That's what we do.
with that as far as recommendations at that point in time.
I'll get you the crown of the road, the top of the road elevations, or do you want the storm?
I would do the crown.
Okay.
If we, what's
That's
going
the
to be more
highest point.
useful? I mean, if you need those elevations of the manhole covers, and then you got a secondary of crown at that location, that would be fine if they're off center, it's on center, but just make it useful to.
So that at Pine Hill, just so you guys know, at Pine Hill where that lift station is, across next to the retirement home, that's going to be your lowest point because the lift stations are always at your lowest points.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be higher where Leo Kid is, and higher where Washington is, because both those flow into Pine Hill. There's nothing in the middle, so they both flow. One flows from Leo Kid, one flows from Washington, and then goes into the lift station. So that middle is you're going to be your lowest point.
Because in a brief conversation I think I had with Matt, he said that there were some funding for lift stations because lift stations were saying about, I don't know, half were at risk for 30.
That's not
Right.
Yeah. 20, right?
And did we get
27, yeah.
generators?
We're working on that right actually as we speak.
And is there a way to get those panels to be like not explosion proof, but more like
So
an IP
they make them waterproof,
67 or
but
something?
when you have the salt air and everything, it kind of ruins the tightness of it. So the only way to get them from flooding is to
Can we do that?
elevate them.
Because I noticed when we
You can.
worked on them prior, the motors are fine, right? Because those are industrial.
It's the panels.
It's the panels,
Because
right?
those pumps are designed to be underneath water.
Sure.
But when you get the panels that flood, then
They're like an extreme duty
So
grade motor. right?
when I talked to at Chasco, well, it's anywhere. So you guys see the water level on the houses. And this is what I was going through FEMA and the emergency response people. So wherever the water line is on the houses or wherever maybe you see them, you add 20% to that. That's actually how high the water got. That line is where the water finally settles at.
So as you ponder that, what we've talked about our lift stations is looking at it from 3 different perspectives, and this all goes back to mitigation funding. And the first thought is, why were the lift stations put there? Obviously, we know they were put there because it's low spot, but there's a secondary reason. The secondary reason is it costs us $1 million to run this pipe, or it costs us $500,000 to put a lift station in. Now, what I would say first thing is let's understand what that deliberation was, and if it cost $150,000 to run the pipe and $50,000 to put the lift station in, I think that's a number that probably we could get funding through the mitigation grants to actually eliminate the lift station. Because if you consider that we spent probably $6,000-7,000 a lift station to get up and running, Did you say?
But
Yeah, per lift station. And if we see this 10 times, we're spending a lot of money that we don't need to spend.
Right.
So understanding that and finding out what ones can be eliminated, we can get grant funding to eliminate is one. The second one is what can be lifted. If we can elevate the panels so it's not going to be inundated in any way, then that's the next mitigation that we need to do. But there's going to be situations where there's not enough room, or it's too costly to lift, or whatever it is. Then we have to look. Okay, how do we make this as waterproof as possible? And understanding that we may have to go back every 3 to 5 years and re-waterproof, that box. But that's just what we do because we don't have any other choice.
Do we have any sense of excess sewage that was processed during the storms? I mean, I don't know how we're billed from
That's interesting.
Newport Richey, but I do know that at least in Pinellas County and around Tampa Bay, there were, 100 and some events. So we're excess water. So the hardening piece, as far as how do I make it waterproof, if we could be in a state where, Port Richey does not provide anything other than sewage to anybody we do business with.
So the good news with every lift station going down is that we weren't pumping anything.
Right.
Now, with that being said, if we're successful in what we do with the mitigation, guess what? We're going to be pumping.
Right.
And then that's the
Costly.
issue, right? Is how much salt water are we going to be pumping into the system? And I'll tell you right now, we're going to get a lot of pushback from Newport Richey.
Right.
While they charge us whatever that going rate is for a gallon, and they can make money off of it, it will flood them out, and they'll lose money because of that. So there's going to have to be an understanding that if we do what we say we're going to do, we also have to make sure that we're not pumping a lot of I&I through the system.
And we're actually working on that too.
So
on the south side.
hardening, if you will,
Carl.
of the
Do you mind turning your microphone on? Thank you.
hardening of the system is a component of that, if you will.
Yeah.
So because that's certainly around Tampa Bay, it's been an issue over the years, and the water quality in Tampa Bay has slid backwards because of some of the events. And I wasn't exactly sure what St. Petersburg was doing, shutting off the water supply, until it dawned on me it was because they couldn't handle the sewage treatment outflow.
Yeah.
So,
And I think that this is more important today from the standpoint of handling regular stormwater events, because if those boxes aren't tight, not the boxes for the electronics, but the boxes where the pumps are and the dry well, if it's not tight, then we're going to be pumping a lot of water, stormwater out, which costs us a lot of money.
Right.
And again, doesn't do any favors to Newport Richey either.
So when we were going around, we didn't catch anybody, but you can tell a lot of these people, when their yard floods, the first thing they do is they take their cleanouts out, because where's that water going to go? It's going to go right into our sewer system. Jesus Christ. There's a lot of that. People do that everywhere, and so that's why we do the smoke testing, because some people tie their gutters or whatever into their sewer line for their home, and it happens a lot. So that's the one reason why we do the smoke testing, to try and stop from all the stormwater going into our system. So what we can do is do our average over a 12-month period. Well, then when we do get that storm, look at it and see actually how much I&I and how much stormwater we actually took in.
gotcha. So you can do a kind of a post-mortem.
It would be
potentially
a ballpark number. It wouldn't be exact, but it would be a ballpark number. And I can tell you, we probably took in a lot of stormwater that we shouldn't have.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's an area that if we can figure out, I'd love to be able to get some good recommendations on something new in that area, because that I think is key. Now, the other area I looked at, in addition to this, was the water system. And I was a little confused, so maybe you guys can help me on it. Is that we had, at the beginning of 24, we had about 30%, 25 or 30% unaccounted for water. Sorry. And then the latest report had us just under 10%. So,
Okay. So there was a glitch in the system. They weren't counting for the irrigated water. They were charging it, but they weren't accounting for the usage on the spreadsheet, which when they sent it to me and the water planner, we combed through it, caught it, and then once those numbers were plugged in, that's how we got below the percentage.
so the historical trend was
Correct.
that error perpetuated.
Correct.
Okay. So we feel pretty confident
Yeah.
in that.
We're still only at like 8% right now. We monitor it every month. We have some months where we're higher than others. It's just how, but we are also changing out a ton of meters where they weren't being registered before, and now they are. We have like 400 meters that weren't registering. We're changing them out that are, everything's being accounted for now. So
How concerned do we need to be with seawater or sewage water that comes out and inundates our distribution system?
So the sewage water and everything won't inundate our water system because our water system has more pressure than what the sewage, it won't leak into it. Is that what you're, like if there was a leak somewhere,
Pressurized
you're
system.
thinking the sewage will leak into it?
It'll suck it in.
We push out too much water pressure, so the water pressure is going to keep the sewage from going in. That makes sense. It kind of acts like a backflow. It's not like a back siphonage where our pressure. Now, if we completely turned everything off and we didn't have any water, yeah, it would leak in there because it would act like a back siphon.
If I had a leak in the system downstream of or a failure in the system downstream of my leak, I could suck water in
Talk about
as the
like a
water
Venturi
flows
effect.
by.
The only way you would suck water in is if you have one, you're putting out more pressure on your side, or two, you fall to negative pressure.
So we don't have to worry about it.
No.
Well,
Okay.
generally you don't have to worry about that. But I've seen systems where you have a leak you don't know about, and you have a fire on that same line that you have a leak, and you're basically sucking all the water out of the line, and then it sucks stuff
Right.
into
You're
it.
drawing more.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I mean,
Because you have another pump at the end.
because they're sucking out
Yeah,
1,400. That's what I'm saying. If you have more pressure on one side, that's where they would
Pull a vacuum on it.
correct.
Yeah.
It would back siphon.
you only. So I mean that's rare. That's like you have the worst luck in the world for that to happen. But one of the scenarios that we almost faced during the Milton, because we lost our well field again.
Yes.
So we went from producing the water, we turned it off, activated the interconnect with Newport Ritchie. And that happened during Helene as well, because we lost the well fields both times. During Milton, because of all the impacts of power loss, fires, everything was going on down in the Tampa, so Hillsborough, Pinellas County, Newport Ritchie was actually starting to get a lower pressure.
Mm-hmm. They were producing more than they were intaking.
And so play that over a longer period with a greater, use of the water, your scenario could happen because you don't have any pressure in your system. And I think what's the level where we'd have to issue a boil water?
Anything under 20 psi.
So
at the source.
Yes. If we were less than 20 psi at our plant, we would have to issue a citywide boil water notice.
Okay.
But if the whole city has pressure and you lose you're less than 20 psi on Island Drive, then you have a break, and we would shut the water on there, and they would issue things.
So in that scenario, we were contemplating the potential that we were going to go below the 20 psi because we were on the interconnect.
Because 80% of New Port Richey's water comes from Tampa Bay water.
Right.
So the Tampa Bay water, all their wells were losing power. They were, because Tampa got hit hard. So New Port Richey wasn't able to produce enough water to suffice us and produce their stuff. So they were going to turn us off.
So so the solution from our perspective, one is we don't want to lose the capacity of our wells filled, so we have to turn on the interconnects. That's one. Second thing is we need more storage. And again, if we had a 1,000,000-gallon tank instead of a 225,000-gallon tank, this probably wouldn't have been an issue at all.
We lost the wells because
Power generation.
So yeah, we didn't have
not an inundation issue.
I'm working with Duke right now, and on top of while I've worked with getting generators for the well field, is having the well field on its own power source. Because they get fed off of Heather Boulevard where Van Buren is with that subdivision.
Right.
The same. So if that street goes out, we lose it out there. We need to have I'm trying to work with Duke for us to get our own power source.
Transformer and everything.
So if those people on Heather lose their power, we still don't lose power. Like if it gets it'll come off of, what is that? Congress right there.
Mm-hmm.
Congress. So it comes down Congress, goes down Heather, and then feeds our water plant as well. Well, if a power line was to fall just past the well field, hit the power line, well, if it's on the same strip as those houses, then we lose power. But if one are separate, then if that power line gets hit, the well field won't lose power.
Gotcha.
But also, we're getting the generators to try and, because there's 2 wells out there where we produce the most water, and getting generators for those. And so all we got to do is go out there, hook them up, fire right back up. Because these well field, there's 3 wells here.
Right.
They are off that generator in the back.
But so it's off of Congress is where they're fed from? Because I thought there was a substation.
So this is our brush pile right here. Our well field right here. So it comes off of here like this.
So does the Duke not operate in a prioritization schema like they used to for hospitals,
That's a nice map.
police departments? So that's
Yeah. They're supposed to. I mean, when we first lost, so at Helene, when we first lost power, we made that request to the EOC, to the
on Friday.
Duke. Yeah, it was the Duke's person was right there. They said that they would make it a priority. So it was 4
Sunday
days,
got turned back on.
4 or 5 days later, we were just bombarding them, and they finally decided, oh yeah, it is a priority. We get it turned back on. Yeah, and they turned it back.
Isn't that frustrating? How's the generators going though? That's like Duke Energy, we're gonna lose power no matter what in a really bad event. So what are you doing on
Those transfer switch? Once the power goes on, the transfer switch kick on.
right?
The generator will take over.
And we're
So yeah,
purchasing
we
them.
actually put money in the budget to do that for
Nice.
this year.
And how many generators is that? What kilowatts?
They're both going to be 100 or 80 or 100.
Okay.
So-
Well, great. Well, that's what we really need because you can't really rely.
Then we won't have to worry about it again.
Right. Okay, that's awesome.
okay.
Generators. I like generators.
And we get them on the 4 main.
I really like
stations, too.
generators, especially big diesel ones. They're great.
So these were all things that were highlighted in HAP that I kind of highlighted from my standpoint that I thought were important. The areas as far as avoidance, I talked about, moving new development. I think of it more from the standpoint we need to have more aggressive standards for new development for these things that adversely impact the community. And that's the part that I'd like to try to get on the books, or at least some recommendations going forward sooner versus later that we can pass on to council, or for planning and zoning as far as that's some other recommendations that they had in there as far as getting planning and zoning. Are we aware of anything that planning and zoning is doing right now in that arena as as it relates to half?
I don't think anything.
Okay. So maybe getting in front of planning and zoning and making some recommendations on that. I'll work on that and bring it to council, bring it to the next meeting, and see if we can't get some things for them to address instead of us addressing. Okay. The other thing that they talk about, and I guess this is where it was from our standpoint, well, stricter building codes was one. Setbacks on the waterfront and floodplain development were some of the areas. Fire station, are we doing anything around the fire station at this juncture?
We are, so we have money in the budget for the preliminary study on relocating / rebuilding a new fire station.
Okay.
We also have a grant in to try to get that paid for through that. But we're also going to be talking right now as part of the mitigation, looking at it as well. We had working with the county, we've had a couple different meetings with the Army Corps of Engineers, and we've submitted a lot of these issues to try to get. So take a step back. So one of the things the Army Corps is saying that as part of these intermediary funding that's going to be happening, there's going to be a lot of money that follows the emergency.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to get a lot of money because of that, because they're kind of the follow-on to the emergency. And so in meeting the county or Richie, meeting with the Army Corps, they said, get into us letters that tell us that you have an issue and explain what the issue is.
Okay.
Originally, I thought it was going to be one letter, but apparently it's two. And so I submitted one for the city and kind of highlighting, one, the storm inundation issues, and then the second, the stormwater issues. And depending upon the situation, the fire department kind of falls in both. So we at least, and I'm waiting for to hear back from, we have at least notified them to get in the queue to go to the next step, which is, okay, here's the programs that, based upon what you're saying, we think we can partner with you on. So,
Okay.
so fire department is in the mix for all these things.
Okay.
The reality is you're probably looking $3 to $5 million when all is said and done.
Right.
And so, getting all the funding that we possibly get is on the table.
All right. All right, those were the main things that I had highlighted. Again, I kind of focused on things that I thought were important to the city as far as from the citizen standpoint, emergency response, and then the utilities area. So I think those were the main takeaways that I had. I didn't know, are any of the formality stuff like adaptation action areas, is that even in our lexicon in the city per se? Because those were some of the recommendations in half. They talked about adaptation action areas, which is a big thing at the state level. Does that give us any credibility with anybody if we push any of those? Or
I mean, more since this is their love language at the state, the adaptation plan.
mm-hmm.
The more that you push it, the more you have the ability to act on it. So for instance, both the fire department and Bay Boulevard were two areas I thought that we could get the state to actually, in the next phase, give us money for study. So the fire station was one project we submitted for the next phase of the, what is that? How we got the money, I can't remember what the program is for the money for the vulnerability analysis and adaptation plan. And so what the state was doing was, as you know, they were effectively appropriating the same amount of money every year, and early on, money only went to the plans. Now they're almost done, but they still have the same amount of money, so they're entertaining studies that are, you know, you implement as part of the plan. And so we submitted for the fire department to get the 50,000 we had budgeted paid for through there. And the second one was to do a study of Bay Boulevard, primarily in that area that's flooding.
Okay.
Since both were identified within the adaptation plan for needs. I can't remember what the Bay Boulevard, it may have been like a $2 million study. It was a huge number. I can't remember what it was. And so we are using that right now to start looking. And the next phase is for the state, and that same, whatever that grant program is the implementation, which is the construction dollars. So that's the way that they're looking at it.
Okay. All right. Is there any other things that anybody else has on their minds for tonight? Other than
I know this is like a overarching political thing, but I'm hoping that there's a lot of political reform at the federal government, and it might actually allow us to. Well, everybody laughs, but the older generation has kind of been in charge for a long, long time, and it's just not working. That's why I'm having such a hard time even recommending anything, because it just costs so much money, and it's like, we actually need development. What kind of development? I don't know, but I'm just hoping that maybe we can really like dial back, or the federal government can dial back, like the DEP and the EPA and the Army Corps and all this nonsense, so we can like dredge our canals and actually fix our place without doing 50 studies for $3 million, and waiting till Jesus comes back or something, because it's a long time potentially, So I'm not super stoked about all the regulatory stuff. That's kind of my thing, but I'm really thankful what happened with the elections and stuff, and I think that they're really going to maybe try to rip out a lot of this nonsense with the government, because it's just nothing's getting done anymore in America. You just can't do anything, It's unfortunate. So,
So when it comes to development, for example, if the housing development comes right there off Holzer, or even on the waterfront, what you have them do for them to come in, you make them upgrade your system to come in. They want to build. Well, they have to also, for stormwater reasons, if there's so much water is coming off their property, well, if we can't take it, well, they have to do their study or do whatever to upgrade our stuff and our system around the area, not like streets away, but like just within their property, within their street. Same goes for water. Same goes for sewer, for lift stations. If they're sending out so much sewage, well, and our lift station can't take it, well, then you make them upgrade and make them do the study.
Well, I mean, not to interrupt, I apologize, but first example in the building code, I think we're precluded from using gray water for recirculation, toilets and stuff. Does that make sense? Because if I got rid of all the gray water and I only dealt with sewage, granted, I changed the mix at the sewage treatment plant, will make the sewage treatment plants unhappy. All right. But is that something that we should consider for that? Because I can significantly reduce my volume of output if I'm able to do that.
Well, building codes, one thing, our specification, what we allow, is different. Our specification in the utility system, stormwater, whatever, supersedes the building code. And our what the city of Port Richey owns. Right. The private side is one thing. Once it hits the right of way, say it's a 50-foot right of way, our specifications, what we want, supersede any building code.
Well, I understand that, but all of our sewage treatment plants are predicated on a certain mix of stuff coming. And when that mix changes, that creates problems with treating your sewage. So if we were able to do something like that, would it be tenable or not? Because we can reduce the volume of output. We change the requirements for the construction to build additional plumbing in, so that is at least designed to be able to do it. Maybe it's not used, but maybe that's what we insist in the design, gray water capabilities. Other parts of the country do this. We do not.
Mhm.
But is it something we should consider to reduce the impact on our utilities?
You mean for irrigation?
No.
Oh, okay.
I
I'm
think
sorry.
he's
I was
talking-
looking at something when you started talking, so I didn't catch the beginning of it.
No,
He's talking
basically,
about a separator.
basically they add stuff in the residence so you take your gray water, shower water, those types of things, and use it for flushing toilets.
Okay. Gotcha.
Toilets are one of your bigger users. Okay. And if you can eliminate that or reuse the water,
Right.
it's just like our ag water. Okay. I'm not using that, even though it's potable, it wouldn't have to be.
Right.
But so those kinds of things should we incorporate in our codes as it relates to development that reduces the load on our utilities and how much monies we have to put forth to handle 100 units. Well, it's really only 50 units because of the way we put our standards in place.
Yeah, I wouldn't know why you couldn't. I mean, from the water conservation side, it's if I'm not mistaken, from water conservation in our comprehensive plan, it talks about doing things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's a problem on the sewage treatment plant side. But so if this is something we're interested in, again, as far as what those things are, we'll go talk to Newport Richie as far as what they can handle, because I know they're very specific on the sewage treatment side.
Well, and what our permit allows too.
Well, it's the mix.
Yeah.
The mix is what they're getting.
Why does that kind of change the mix? Because you're basically just
Less-
recycling.
Less water going in, it changes the salinity and all the stuff. It's how they aerate. And so it's a complicated thing.
Yeah.
But if we were able to do this, it does some other things. It reduces our water usage. It reduces, less sizable pumping capabilities, less wells. I mean, lower costs.
I think if in just thinking, so the water conservation piece really doesn't take into consideration the wastewater piece. I mean, most of the water conservation is how do you reduce the draw from the ground for the water, right?
Right.
And so if you think about a recirculation system that's non-potable that you're using for the toilet, well, it doesn't go down the shower drain and out. It goes down the toilet and out, right? Because you're probably not going to recapture from the non-potable side unless you're using it for irrigation. You wouldn't be capturing gallon for gallon that's coming out of the shower, right? You wouldn't be catching gallon for gallon out of the dishwasher or the washer. You wouldn't catch. There would still be an amount that's going out of the system. Is my guess. I mean, I'm not an engineer to know this. I'm just thinking that probably the average shower is going to produce more water than the average toilet flush, and so there's probably some type of storage device.
Yes.
And how much does that hold? And once it's full, it overflows. I'm assuming into the
Has to have a separate pump and.
It overflows into the sanitary sewer system, and again, depending upon what is being recirculated, if it's filtering. I mean, there's a lot of different things there that could impact that.
Right. So it's just a matter of, is this something that we want to consider because it has a significant impact, but it involves changing our development standards in the city on what we would require, whether it's on a residential side, whether it's on a multifamily side. but there are things out there we could do to enable that by us saying that this is important to us. So,
And again, just from the comprehensive plan standpoint, we are supposed to be doing things that work towards the conservation of the water system.
Mhm.
So, I mean, forgetting the sanitary sewer piece is what we're supposed to be doing as part of the plan.
well, I get any capacity, I'll reach out to my sanitary sewer folks on the plant building and see what I can find out.
Yeah, because that reuse stuff, car washes do it. They reuse 96% of their water.
Mhm.
Yes.
They put it in separators and then it gets pumped back out and back through and then they use it.
And it's the same thing on your Leeds construction standards have those types of things for environmentally sensitive. Blah, blah, blah. So if those are things that we think are important that we should bring forward, then I just throw them out there. So if somebody's interested in some of that, go look, see what you find out, and then we can talk about it next time.
Okay.
That's all I have. You good?
I'm good.
Good?
Good.
Good. Do I have a motion to?
Motion to
Oh,
adjourn.
could just say one thing.
Oh.
Yes, sir.
I forgot to send this out. Sorry. Forgot to send this out, but I just wanted you to be aware. Pasco County Extension Agent, Megan Moore, had reached out to us. This was well before the storms happened, and wanted to get permission to put in a tidal gauge somewhere in the city. And I believe they're looking at Waterfront Park. I lost. I'm not sure. It's either Waterfront. It's either Nick's Waterfront or Basher. It's one of those three places. And it's a small unit, but benefit to it is we get the data, and they're partnering with. It says Secura, but it's not Secura. It's Southeast Water Level. And so we've given them the okay. And again, I kind of lost contact because I signed it to someone else to deal with exactly where it's going, but I'll find out.
Brasford would be good, so we don't have
think
the
it may-
influence of
is where
the
they're
water. That's where USF had theirs. The other good thing is if it's real time, it would be the only real time monitor between Yankee Town, Cedar Key, and Clearwater. So that would be good. And then when we get our water barriers on the river and stuff, we can use that specifically to initiate it through artificial intelligence. That would be all great.
That's a stretch there, bud.
So, Ashley, one thing, how's our date looking in December? Is it
December 9th. It's the second Monday in December, so.
so that looks good from the city standpoint. So December 9th, it's a little short cycle here, but that will be our next date. So we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
A second.
All in favor?
Uh,
Meeting adjourned.